This is ILTV on the hour, bringing the biggest stories from Israel and the Middle East. I'm Shosh Bedrosian. It's 2 p.m. here in Israel and 7 a.m. here in New York, and today is day 648 of the war in Gaza. Let's get into all the top headlines at this hour. We begin this hour with the tragic deaths of 3 IDF soldiers in the Gaza Strip that were killed in a tank explosion in northern Gaza. Another officer was also seriously injured. The fallen soldiers were named as Staff Sergeant Shoam Menachem, 21 years old, from Yardena, Sergeant Shlomo Yakir Sherem, 20, from Efrat, and Sergeant Yuli Faktor, 19 years old, from Rishon LeZion. The officer was not named, although he is in serious condition. All 4 troops served with the 401st Armored Brigade, and Army investigators are still trying to piece together the cause of the deadly blast inside of the tank, which came amid ongoing clashes with Hamas in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Now, according to the Army, the initial probe found the tank was hit by an explosive device while operating in the north. It's uncertain whether the blast was caused by a Hamas RPG or by a malfunctioning shell that detonated inside of the tank. Their deaths raised the Israeli toll in the Gaza Strip ground offensive to 454 soldiers. And the announcement of the casualties came just before 2 rockets were launched from the central Gaza Strip at southern Israel from central Gaza just yesterday. The rockets fell in an open area without causing damages or injuries. And disturbing footage is also circulating on social media, showing hundreds of Palestinians lying on the ground amid prolonged gunfire. And based on the location of the video, the incident appears to have occurred near one of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation distribution centers in Rafah. The IDF says that the details of the video are under review, but there were no known casualties from IDF fire at the Rafah distribution center. Now, the U.S. and Israeli-backed GHF has faced harsh criticism from the UN and other aid groups, with charge that it fails to meet the needs of the Gaza population, and many deaths have been reported among those seeking aid, according to reports. Now, there have been near-daily incidents with casualties near the aid centers. GHF released a statement calling the misleading and false reports coming directly from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry, and says the United Nations' reliance and coordination with the terror group is used to smear GHF's effort into distributing aid and should be investigated by the international community. They say, quote, "The fact is most deadly attacks on the aid sites have been linked to UN convoys, including last week, where it was reported that 40 people were killed trying to reach UN aid trucks. Instead of hurling insults and promoting Hamas's false propaganda from the sidelines, the UN and humanitarian groups should be working collaboratively with GHF to maximize the amount of aid and securely delivered into Gaza." And hostages for ceasefire talks are underway in Doha in an effort to explore all possibilities for a mediated hostage and ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Israel has reportedly submitted a 3rd map to Doha mediators on an IDF withdrawal, with Israeli officials saying they're showing willingness and seriousness for achieving a deal. Israel reportedly eased its position, submitting a new series of maps to mediators that envision a further reduction in IDF presence inside of Gaza during the 60-day proposal truce under discussion right now. But Arab diplomats say the changes are not significant enough to create a breakthrough. Hamas is reportedly reviewing the updated Israeli proposal, and a response is expected in the coming days. Israel is now calling on Hamas to express willingness as well to be flexible, as Israel is adding more concessions to reach a deal. Now, joining us to discuss all this is Ariel Kahana, diplomatic correspondent for Israel Hayom, and Professor Kobi Michael, a senior researcher at INSS. Thank you both for being with us today.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Mayan.
Ariel, I first want to start with you. There's been on and off information that a deal could come this week, it could come next week, and even months ago they were saying nearly the exact same thing of what we're hearing now. Why has nothing come to fruition yet? Why is there so much back and forth on this topic? We know that the Israeli public is holding on, that something will take shape very soon.
Well, I think, man, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, Israel is very flexible in those negotiations. since the last deal that ended, if I'm not wrong, in the middle of March. There were negotiations coming and going back and forth and so on. But Israel, time after time, including the last days, is trying more, is I would say pushing its own red lines. Metaphorically and practically regarding Gaza maps, because Prime Minister Netanyahu wants it a lot. And I can tell you, I heard it from him directly. And I think all the moves he's doing is to reach it. Those are many people in Israel, including some of his families, who resist his approach. But in any case, Netanyahu wants a lot to reach a deal for 10 hostages, live hostages. And but Hamas is refusing time after time, demanding the end of the war, and for that Netanyahu refused. So actually, that's the reason why the talks are stuck. And frankly, I'm not sure it will be possible to have a breakthrough. But Israel keeps trying.
Right. So the pressure back on Hamas, like we said. Kobi, I want to get your take on this. What types of concessions would Hamas also need to make in order to get a deal back on track for these talks to no longer be at a standstill? What does Hamas need to do now?
Hamas has to do three things. The first one is to dismantle itself. The second thing is to release the hostages, or the first thing to release the hostages, the second thing to dismantle itself, and the third thing to leave the Gaza Strip, its leadership, knowing that there will not be ever again a sort of an effective sovereign power in the Gaza Strip. Now, the problem is exactly like Ariel said, but I would like to introduce it from Hamas' point of view, is that Hamas is seeking to reach to the final status agreement by paying a price of something which is even less than a partial agreement. And this is something that Israel cannot accept. By the way, Israel is willing to end the war, to have all the hostages, and to assure that Hamas will be dismantled and the Gaza Strip will not be controlled anymore by Hamas. But Hamas is not willing, of course, not at this point, and I'm not sure that in the near future as well. So this is exactly the unbridgeable gaps between both sides. And I think that Israel did a step forward. And I think that it is pretty accepted and understood among those who support an agreement now and among those who support the continuation of the war, that the end result must be that Hamas is not there anymore as a sovereign power.
Right. But my question back to you is, how likely is that, Kobi, for Hamas to not be in power anymore? I actually had a Middle East expert tell me the other day, it is so obvious that Hamas has put its own political agenda in front of the 2 million plus people that live inside of the Gaza Strip, Palestinians. What is your take on that? Do you think it's possible Hamas could get to the point where they would step away? And if so, what would that look like? And then Ariel, we'll get back to you on that point as well. But Kobi, go first.
I'm not sure that Hamas will be willing unless two things will happen. The first one, the military pressure will be untolerated, and the second thing, that the Qatarian pressure will be untolerated. Unfortunately, we increased the military pressure on the one hand, not enough, by the way, and on the other hand, the Qatarian pressure is not satisfying. Is not enough. And this is because the Americans are not pressuring the Qatarians till the end. If both pressures will be taken simultaneously, I believe that there is a higher probability that Hamas will change its position. But due to the fact that I cannot see Hamas changing its position right now, I think that we cannot seize the fire.
Ariel, what do you think it would take for Hamas to step back and to stop causing their own people to suffer at this point and to make a deal?
So first of all, Mayan, and I want to make one remark about the pictures of the video you showed before, about as if IDF soldiers were shooting towards people who came to take food from IDF centers. So first of all, we don't know whether it was really IDF or maybe Hamas people who don't want, do not want the Gazans to go to the IDF centers. Now, all of that is connected strongly to the question, who will govern Gaza, and is it possible to push Hamas to give up? I think it won't be possible without military pressure, actually without military force, completely force, full against Hamas to destroy them. I don't see them coming to a deal which they will agree to lose power of Gaza. It will not happen, in my opinion, without a war. But in any case, it's very important to note that all what we see regarding the IDF activity in Gaza, the food that the IDF, this American Israeli fund, is giving for free to Gazans, and also as if criticized, you hear, and you said it from UN organizations, all of that is a campaign. It's a political campaign by the UN, by Hamas, to keep holding Gaza. Hamas understands very well that the day he will not be the one to spread the food in Gaza, then he will lose control of the strip. So this is part of the question, who will govern Gaza. And all the allegations, if Tzal, IDF is killing Gazans, and all the criticism as if there is not enough food in Gaza, all of that, it's a political campaign, it's propaganda, it's not based on facts, it's political propaganda, because the UN, together with Hamas, do not want to lose control of Gaza. I want to tell you, Mayan, very shortly, that I was physically myself, I was in Hamas servers headquarters in Gaza more than a year and a half ago. That was in tunnel in Gaza, but was up over the ground was UNRWA's main headquarters in Gaza. So you had Hamas intelligence computer servers underground, and UNRWA had main headquarters in Gaza overground, because UNRWA and the UN and Hamas are all connected together, and they do not want to lose control over Gaza. And that's why you see the campaign from one hand and Hamas refusals in the hostage negotiations from the other hand, because they do not want a deal. They do not want of course, to lose control over Gaza. And that's why, in my opinion, we, Israel, have no other choice than to use Tzal full power and destroy Hamas, and on the way also to bring the hostages back.
Right, Ariel, and to your point about GHF and Hamas wanting to completely get rid of it, we've understood that Hamas wants to get rid of it for a reason, right? In order to get their hands back on the control of aid and food inside of the Gaza Strip, to continue to govern their own people. I want to ask both of you, we've seen from past negotiations, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy who has helped push these deals over the finish line, what will it take for him to finally get into these negotiations in Doha? He was supposed to leave last Thursday. He did not. But when will he enter the negotiations here? Kobi, we'll start with you.
I believe that he will enter when there will be further indications about a higher probability or feasibility for an agreement, and he will enter in order to make the last important push. I believe that the American administration comes closer and closer to the understanding that they didn't do or have not done enough with regard to Qatar, and they have to increase the pressure on Qatar. The idea that Hamas leaders still live in a very comfortable zone, which is Qatar, Doha, with all of their money, with all of the facilities that they use there, and they believe that they are with the upper hand and they can put demands in front of Israel and in front of the mediator, including the Americans, is something that indicates that they are in a deep misperception with regard to their understanding the reality. And somebody has to open their eyes in this regard. And I think that the only ones that are able to open their eyes by doing something which is meaningful is Qatar. So I believe that if Witkoff will enter and will appear in Doha, it will be in order to put the last pressure on Qatar, and it will be only when they have a clear idea about the higher feasibility that there is an agreement.
Yeah, and Ariel, if and when Steve Witkoff does get to Doha, Qatar, what's typically his role in these negotiations? If he's coming at the last few final stages of negotiations, what does he typically do when this happens?
So as Kobi said, Witkoff will not go there until there will be a real reason for him to go, and that means coming close to successful end of the negotiations. But I tell you, Mayan, personally, I don't see it happening in the coming days. There was some kind of optimism last week with the Prime Minister delegation to Washington. I was there with him and with his people, but you know, it's more than a week now and we see no breakthrough. I'm not sure. I'm not sure Witkoff will go to Doha anymore. But regarding Qatar and its role, first of all, I totally agree with Professor Michaeli that Qatar is playing, I would say, multiple faces game over here. There was just tonight a very serious, interesting expose by Laura Loomer. She discovered that a senior Republican congresswoman was and is related strongly to Qatar. That, in my opinion, must be checked. On top of that, this evening in the U.S. Congress, you're going to have a hearing regarding the anti-Semitism incitement in the U.S. campuses and the relations to Qatar's money. So again, the U.S. must investigate and I would say coming strongly to what's going on between Qatar and all other players, including the U.S. itself, including what's going on with senior Israelis who are in touch in Qatar. We have to check what is this country doing, because from one hand, you know, they share interest with the US and they seem a very normalized country and so on. But on the other hand, they support Al Jazeera, they support Muslim brothers, they support extremism, and of course, they funded Hamas. So I would say Western countries have to go deep inside to check what's going on with that country, because maybe they help from one side, but they definitely damage a lot from the other side.
Right, as these conversations are ongoing inside of Doha, both of you, how does this affect the Israeli public here? Of course, I think we've continued to report for almost 2 years now. I think Israeli society can be divided at times with this deal. But when there is a moment where we could be on the brink of a deal, what does this do to Israeli society? Ariel, we'll start with you, and then Kobi will finish off with you.
Well, Mayan, there is no question that, by the way, it doesn't matter who agree to the deal or resist the deal. 100% of Israelis wants the hostages back home now. There is no question about it. Maybe there are disagreements about what is the right way to bring them back home. But the issue itself, they are our brothers and sisters, and we want them home. We want them alive. Those who are still alive, we want them here alive, and those who are unfortunately murdered, we want them, their bodies, to bring them to Kever Israel, to Jewish cemeteries. They are our brothers and sisters, and we want them home, and they must be home and be here now. It doesn't mean we have to give up all our red lines. But again, I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of 100% of Israelis. I even say 100% of the Jewish people. They must be home now. It's a pain. It's a wound for all of Israelis, all of the Jewish people. They should be here, and let's hope and pray it will happen. It will happen soon.
Yeah, we know that 20 of them are believed to be alive. 50 hostages are still in captivity at this time. Kobi, will finish off with you. How is the Israeli public handling these ongoing negotiations? Maybe we lost Kobi. Can you hear us? Looks like we lost him. Thank you both so much for joining us as we continue.
I would like to make two comments in this regard. The first
Go
one
ahead.
is that Israel has two. Yes, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Can you? Okay. I would like to make two comments in this regard. The first one is that Israel has to continue and to even increase the military efforts as if there is no negotiation, and to continue the negotiation as if there is no war. there is a sort of an inner contradiction or tension between both, but it can be done. And therefore, the Israeli Prime Minister has to do the utmost efforts in order to convince the Israeli public that the government of Israel does the utmost efforts in order to cut a deal, in order to reach to an agreement. And the Israeli Prime Minister has to play with, I would say, open cards vis-a-vis the Israeli constituency, and showing that Israel does more and more concessions on the one hand, and that Hamas eventually is the ultimate barrier, and it is not ready to make the further step. And I think that we have to prepare ourselves as a society and as a military, and even in the political, the diplomatic level, that the negotiation will fail, and have eventually, if it will fail, eventually we will have to accomplish the occupation of the entire Gaza Strip, to establish a contemporary military administration in order to facilitate the conditions for an alternative civilian governance and the beginning of the reconstruction process of the Gaza Strip without Hamas there.
Professor Kobi Michael and Ariel Kahana from Israel Hayom, thank you both so much for joining us today. We will follow all of these updates. Hopefully a ceasefire and hostage deal will happen very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And the Druze community in Israel is protesting over the situation happening inside of Syria after dozens of Druze were killed in violent clashes against the community by government forces and Bedouin tribes. Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz instructed the IDF to carry out strikes on Syrian forces following the attack on the Druze in their majority-held city of Sueda in southern Syria. Syria's defense minister has now apparently announced a ceasefire in the city, and ILTV's military correspondent David Matlin is joining us now to discuss the ongoing tensions inside of Syria and what this means for the Druze community. Thanks so much for being with us, David.
Hi, Shosh. Yes, there's been a lot of pressure on the IDF to start with that from the local Druze community. I mean, you have tens of thousands of Druze inside of Israel residing in the Golan Heights, just across the fence from these areas where all the Druze in Syria still live, family connections as well. And just to add to that, the Druze are very prominent figures in the upper echelons of the IDF, and really from top to bottom of the IDF fighting forces and ranks here. Really, in fact, there's been heavy casualties within Druze communities as well in Israel. So this is a very serving, a very involved community in the country of Israel, and therefore, when they bring concerns about their family members and the well-being of their, brethren in Syria to the IDF, to the political echelon, I should mention here, it gets taken seriously. And so what we've seen, in fact, is the political echelon, the defense minister Katz spelling this out very clearly, that Israel essentially ordered the IDF, the political echelon, again, the IDF clear that this is coming from the top. This isn't something decided on the front lines by an officer. This is being decided, by, at the very top, the defense minister and the prime minister to intervene in what happened here in the last few days in Syria. We saw the IDF now releasing much more info today about just the nature of their strikes. It was reported yesterday that some tanks were attacked in Sueda, in this part of this predominantly Druze area of Syria. It's in fact a lot more than that. The IDF was laying out really massive strikes against armored personnel carriers, serious artillery, multiple launch rocket systems in Syria as well, tank columns, other vehicles and positions. So a lot more than just tanks were targeted there. And this being in line with these IDF doctrine right now, and again coming from the top, from the IDF government, from the Israeli government, that there will be no threats of this magnitude allowed to exist in this part of southern Syria, as well as saying, hey, we're coming directly to the aid of the Druze. That's been the line from Israel so far.
David, I want to ask, what was the catalyst for these violent clashes against the Druze community? Why did this pick back up? A few months ago, we covered Basically a very similar story of the Druze community being attacked, basically because of a rumor that was spread about a religious Druze leader, which ended up being completely fabricated. And these attacks ended up happening on this very important minority to the Middle East. To tell our viewers, the Druze community sees themselves as the key to making peace in the Middle East. They come from all different countries here, from Lebanon to the Golan Heights to Syria, all connected within their faith and their culture and traditions. So tell me, what was the reason for this clash, for all of these clashes in the last 2 days to take place?
Well, to back up a little bit here and look at the Syrian civil war and the course of the war, well over a decade ago, or I can think of prominent moments even around 2018 or so, when the Druze community in southern Syria was really embattled. I mean, this again has been not no man's land, but chaos in Syria throughout the war, and certainly in recent years. There have been a lot of different groups vying for power, even just in the Druze, predominantly Druze areas in southern Syria. So you have jihadi elements of the Sunni factions here, some connected to ISIS, different Bedouin clans and tribes in there. These are complex arenas where, in the vacuum now of the Assad regime, there's even more call for help, even more push for territory and push for control. Essentially, people are worried about protecting their own communities. There are resources involved, but even back then, I was going to say here that they were crying out to Israel for help. The Druze were looking for help from the only stable places in the region that they could find it. But today, it's important to mention that the Syrian Defense Ministry, their defense officials coming out of Damascus, who have deployed a lot of security forces to this area, they've declared it a ceasefire. They've declared that, hey, the hostilities are over in this area. Whether or not that's true, they've already chimed in and said, we've stopped this, it's over. We are the only power that has, can use weapons and use hard power and use violence in the country. They're trying to reestablish themselves as the sovereign to navigate this situation. Unclear where it'll go, and unclear exactly. It's still right now what's happening up there. Although we know that the Syrians are kind of warning the Israelis off, saying, look, no more external intervention. They didn't call out Israel by name here, but they've talked about external factors, international intervention. They're sort of vaguely referring to the Israeli intervention in this area to sort of break up the fight, protect the Druze as far as Israel sees. But again, this is territorial issues right now. Communities worried about protecting themselves, and others, quite honestly, out to conquer the others. So we'll see how much central authority the government in Damascus is able to exert.
Sure. And going back to just the regional ties and the implications here, we know that recently the United States and Israel have been behind closed doors, but actually more in public now, working on some type of normalization between the countries now that this new leader is in fact in Syria after the Assad regime collapsed. Could this have any implications, these violent clashes, on what could be normalized ties in the future between these three countries?
Well, it's certainly presenting a fresh test of the established connections that are already there. I mean, for some weeks now, it's been revealed that there are direct contacts across the border between Syrian officials based out of Damascus and the IDF and Israeli officials. So this is an open channel of communication. We're seeing various positive signs of this throughout the international arena. Even Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, in the same room, in the same committee with his counterpart from Syria yesterday. That was a fairly big deal, things we've never seen before. And of course, all the other comments. I want to reference as well the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak, who's overseeing this. He's been sort of attached as an envoy to the Syrian and Lebanese situation. He's been speaking glowingly about the regime in Damascus at this point and sort of their efforts to normalize. So we have all the indicators to believe that even despite this test right now, obviously this was a big one. Israel launching major airstrikes in parts of Syria, I think careful airstrikes at the same time. They didn't harm any of the security forces as far as we know. And again, the Syrian government responding tepidly to that, not straight calling out Israel, but asking for the end of international intervention, in their words, vague terms being used. So it sounds like things are still on track. With the diplomatic path with Syria, there's still a lot of functional ties. And that both sides, really, certainly in Syria, they want stability. They want some form of normal relations, at least in some part of their country.
Yeah, and just to get your quick take on what's happening in Gaza, we have about 30 seconds left. We know 3 soldiers were killed just yesterday. Why are soldiers continuing to die inside of the Gaza Strip? We continue to see explosions being one of the reasons for this.
look, it's a really dangerous place. This is a real war front, the type the IDF hasn't seen at least since 2006. 2014, you could argue, brought in some level of this type of combat. So this is a major battle arena. There are a lot of explosives involved, and in this case, it seems to be a malfunctioning tank shell, which they're claiming exploded in the tank, and that would explain why the 3 guys inside were killed and the officer at the top survived. Usually the opposite, but it's just a dangerous arena. There's a lot going on. These are dangerous tools in the hands of IDF soldiers, but I know that from the inside, they act with the utmost care and security as much as they can.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, David. And that's a wrap here on ILTV on the Hour. Bring you all the top headlines when they come out in real time. Thanks so much for joining us.